Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I think again, excuse me, so just so you understand, so we got a great, excuse me, I'm not responding to you, I'm talking to this gentleman, will you please sit down? Excuse me, very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, you are not called on, excuse me. But to say that, what you said is so insulting to me. It's a very terrible thing that you said.
Welcome back to AM Joy. Well, if there are two words Donald Trump loves to hit the media with, and no, not no collusion or fake news, they're the ones that you just heard. Excuse me. It's a phrase, or rather a rebuke, that Trump uses to avoid topics he doesn't like and to shut down reporters who ask him questions he doesn't want to answer. Excuse me is how Trump tries to put reporters in their place for daring to do their jobs. This week, he used it to cut off reporters during a press gaggle before he boarded Marine One, and it worked. Rather than have to answer questions about whether White House counsel Don McGahn lied to Robert Mueller or whether he would let McGahn testify to Congress, Trump was able to redirect the conversation just by repeatedly making reporters stop talking. Excuse me. The day before, his press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, held her first press briefing in almost 2 months, off the record and not for broadcast, and only answering questions from children, the children of journalists participating in Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Day. Journalists who now know that Sanders told Mueller's investigators under oath that she just made up information during White House press briefings. So who knows what tall tales she told those kids. It's all very authoritarian state, and it comes as we learn more and more details of just how much Trump is leaning on Fox News, not just for emotional support, but for actual policy advice. Even recently putting Fox Business host and immigration hardliner Lou Dobbs on speakerphone during a meeting of the Council of Advisors, according to the Washington Post, which calls the Trump-Fox connection a, quote, echo chamber on ideology and policy. Joining me now is filmmaker and activist Rob Reiner, Michael Tomasky, columnist at the Daily Beast and author of the great new book, If We Can Keep It, How the Republic Collapsed and How It Might Be Saved. Tiffany Cross of the Beat DC, and Gabriel Sherman, MSNBC contributor and special correspondent for Vanity Fair. A power panel, as it were. Thank you all for being here. Rob, I want to start with that excuse me thing, because it struck me and when I pitched this story to my team this morning, that Donald Trump literally has a way of getting to filibuster and not answer questions. And the thing that's odd about it is that the press doesn't simply walk away from him or turn off the cameras. In the same way, he was able to kind of bully the White House Correspondents Association to not have a comedian. So it works. It does work. And what he's done, you reference Sarah Sanders, her entire job is excuse me. That's what she's doing. She's basically saying, I'm not going to talk to anybody about anything. Right. And he does have his propaganda wing with Fox, who he doesn't say excuse me to. And he is, the one thing he is good at is understanding how to work the media. Yes. That is his one attribute, and he's playing it, incredibly. He's got, we were talking earlier, if Richard Nixon
had Fox News, he wouldn't have had to resign. So we have a situation where a guy who's a master manipulator of the media takes Fox News. Anything that's going to harm him, he parks them, either Sarah Sanders. I'm still surprised that Kellyanne Conway goes on the air, and I'm still surprised that news outlets allow her to go on, because it's pure, unadulterated propaganda.
It is Monday, the 29th of April of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. That's right, folks. It's been another one of those weekends. More lies have been told this weekend than really many months of lies combined. Trump went to Green Bay because he wanted to pack it in. And he did. Now, we call what Trump espoused as being lies. The New York Times referred to them as inaccurate refrains. I guess when they had that meeting with Trump, he said, hey, you gotta lay off me. And so the New York Times is. I don't quite understand. I've worked in newsrooms before, back when they had to set type, actual literal metal pieces of type, letters and grammatical symbols, and you had to place them in this printing machine. And the least amount of characters, the better for the people trying to set that type. So I don't understand inaccurate refrain versus lie. Lie is only 3 characters. Only 3. But the New York Times deemed it responsible journalism to, I don't know, get poetic. Inaccurate refrain. An inaccurate refrain is Paul McCartney and that monstrosity Band on the Run. That is an inaccurate refrain. And as I told a friend on Twitter last night, you'll notice Michael Jackson did not steal any of the Wings songbook. And that tells you everything you need to know. And Trump's lies about mothers and doctors. Moms are having their babies, and then the mom and the doctor consult with each other and wrap the baby up and kill it. Now, I gotta say, I have been in the room when my son was born. In fact, I wasn't only in the room, I was assisting. And it was in a hospital setting, too. It was almost like an act of Congress to allow me to be in there. I had to sign all these releases that I fell over and cracked my head open. Mom would be taken care of first, then the baby, and then me. So if I wanted to risk falling over and cracking my head open and laying there bleeding, then I could do it. Well, I grew up on a ranch and a farm, and, I gotta say, delivering foals, horses, and any number of mammals is a lot more difficult than a human baby, I gotta say. But I was right there. And I don't know how a woman would have the chemical makeup after going through the process of birth to then say, kill the baby. Trump thinks that because he has no empathy for another human being, even his own offspring. Unless it's Ivanka, but that's a little different sort of dynamic there and had nothing to do with her birth. So, of course, Trump could go up there and lie to his baskets of deplorables. And they lapped it up, and they laughed, and they hooted, and they hollered, and they said, lock her up. 60-some million people voted for him, as far as we know. Maybe we should ask Parscali if there were a few votes added. He would know. We'll get to him in just a second. So Trump perpetuates this lie, and I got to tell you, this lie about moms and doctors conspiring to wrap up their babies in blankets and kill them is blood libel. It is what was used against the Jews to perpetuate pogroms upon them. This is the same weekend that we had to deal with another synagogue shooting and killing. Could Trump have broken away from the very fine people meme to offer his condolences? No. No, he had to double down on there's some very fine people there in white supremacy land. Because they vote. And they vote for him. So let's get to this Parscale guy speaking about voting. He's got 3 different states now that he believes can be flipped into Trump's favor. And when he said flipped, I was wondering, you mean flipped with Russian help again? Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, you've already been, busted for that. So now you're going to go to New Mexico, Colorado, and I can't remember the other one. Maybe it was Arizona. New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado. I think those are the 3. But regardless, Parscale believes that they can be flipped in Trump's favor. Flipped? Vote tallies flipped? Is that what you mean, Parscale? Mr. Digital Operator working hand in hand with Vlad and his team? That really should be major on the news. It should be. But there's so much going on as River City Hash Mondays. We had to slice and dice and take all the leftovers and put it back in to, really a gourmet dish that I'm sure you will love. Because what's on the rest of the menu today? Well, of course, at the top, that was Joyanne Reed's panel, and Rob Reiner in particular, pretty much pointing out that Sarah Sanders' entire job is excuse me. The verbal trope that Trump uses to shut people up. When he's asked a question or just told something he doesn't like, he will always say, excuse me, excuse me. And it looks like Sarah Sanders, as well as Kellyanne Conway's whole entire job is, excuse me, just shutting people up. All right. Well, thank you for pointing that out. I think it's something that some of us already knew, but it's good. It's good to point it out. Hey, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, by the way. Texas Republicans are forced by a court to admit that their voter fraud panic was a lie. Not an inaccurate refrain. It was called a lie. The court said it was a lie. And the Texas Republicans have to admit it was a lie. GOP Federalist Society judges launch a bizarre attack on Black Lives Matter and the First Amendment. Yeah, looks like they're going to decide that cops have the right to sue leaders of protests for any threat that cop may feel. Yeah, they're already taught to be afraid. American cops are the most scared group in the whole world. In the whole world. And Facebook's newest fact checkers are Koch-funded climate deniers. The last group of fact checkers came from the Federalist Society. My God. Well, Zuckerberg's trying to figure it out, and that's what happens when you go through Harvard without ever taking a humanities class. After the break, we then moved to the chef's table, where former U.S. Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates said if Trump was not president, he would be indicted. Now, a lot of people have been saying that, but Sally Yates came to the White House to warn them about Russian involvement, and then she got fired. Yeah, some people say it's because she stood up to Trump about his anti-Muslim ban. No, they wanted her fired, and they needed any excuse, and that one happened to be very convenient. And despite opposition from China, the Pentagon sailed 2 U.S. Navy warships through the strategic Taiwan Strait. Rattling sabers, my friend. Rattling sabers. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right-ish of the page is the chat room link, and go ahead, engage there. Kelly Lincoln is monitoring that. I got to tell you, she has to go out and make a living, but she does that job admirably. So do engage. If you would then take a gander to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the contribute link button. If you could become a recurring Patreon to Netroots Radio, I got to tell you, this powerhouse of resistance has been resisting for 8 years. Yes, we're celebrating our 8th anniversary. Isn't that something? Of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance, as the founders originally intended. You know, we're able to do this because of what comes out of our own wallets, and you are our biggest contributor, and we thank you for that. We are in a savings mode right now. We need to collect funds to buy new machinery because machines wear out after a period of time, and I don't know what it is. You know, I fought against the idea of planned obsolescence. This whole tech industry is predicated upon planned obsolescence. But machines are wearing out, so we're going to have to buy some. Oops. And thank you for your generosity. We are really, truly unable to do this without you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's very easy. Just go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom, even though he's busy and on the road doing, well, God's work for making sure a blue wave turns into a tsunami. Indeed. Follow me on Twitter @Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then put up links on social media, because that show notes and links diary is really an integral part to this whole multimedia operation. We lack an overhead projector, but we have a virtual one, and that's called the internet. Isn't that something? Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. And podcasts, of course, can be found on Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And they're all out there, every single one. Okay. This, I wanted to mention real quick about William Barr. What is this guy? Yeah, he's a rat effer. Been around for a while, rat effing. And it's the demeanor that allows people like him to be able to advance so far. Now, that Matt Whitaker, you know, his policies, I had to tell you, weren't very different. But it was all about demeanor now, wasn't it? Huh. Well, William Barr is apparently refusing to testify to Congress this week because he doesn't want to be asked questions by lawyers. Imagine that when you think of every single Democrat that had to get hauled up to Congress by any number of these weird committees. In fact, I always thought that was the only way that it should be, is that staff lawyers should be asking these questions. The committee staff lawyer asks the questions. But William Barr lied. And maybe he doesn't want to go in front of Congress under oath because he fears Trump more than the law. Where are we? Well, I'll tell you where we are. Let's get to this first article about Texas Republicans being forced by a court to admit that their voter fraud panic was a lie. Emily Singer of Share Blue Media brings us this. Well, Texas tried to purge 95,000 people from the voter rolls by claiming they voted illegally, but it was all a lie. You know, sort of like moms and doctors after the baby is born. 9 months of carrying the baby. all the morning sickness. You get like the nursery all painted, and you get the sonogram that shows what kind of gender the baby's going to be, and all the showers and the happiness and the anticipation. And then the mom and the doctor decide, let's kill this little brat. Who wants it anyway? And it was a lie. But people believe it. About 60 million, apparently. And I got to say, I think it was less. But we'll just say 60 million believe that BS. And if they don't believe it, they don't care. Because the economy is doing so well. I don't know for who. Well, I do know for who. And it's not the guy tapping parts and putting threads on nuts and bolts. Republican Secretary of State in Texas was forced to completely retract his lie about finding 95,000 non-citizens on Texas voter rolls, a statistic he used to try to purge tens of thousands of eligible voters from the books. This is one of these plans hatched by Chris Kobach. Where's Chris Kobach now? Yeah, he's fighting this illegal alien we got to root out every single illegal alien, and we're going to use the census to do it. As part of a settlement with civil rights groups, the state of Texas will have to rescind its initial advisory that made the false claims about voter fraud, and will have to notify anyone who received correspondence questioning their registration and citizenship that they are, in fact, still registered to vote in the U.S. Well, let's hope that they can find them. 3 months after the state released a discriminatory and flawed voter purge list, they have finally agreed to completely withdraw the advisory that risked throwing tens of thousands of potentially eligible voters off the rolls. And I know Texas Republicans are upset because they're really counting on those 95,000 Democrats not being able to vote. Oh, yes. Of course they would be Democrats. Texas Secretary of State David Whitley announced in January that he uncovered a massive number of non-citizens on the voter rolls and claimed 58,000 of them voted in Texas. Now, this is an equation that was made up by Chris Kobach, taking some dubious statistic and then conflating it into something completely different, but it sounds so believable. Millions of people voted in Maine. Millions of illegal aliens went to Maine and voted. Yeah, you would think you'd see them in line. Where were they? Whitley's claim began to fall apart almost immediately after he made it. Counties realized that some of the people on the list were, in fact, naturalized citizens, while others were just duplicate names, like John Smith, John A. Smith, John S. Smith, John Smythe. Yet that didn't stop the purge effort, nor did it stop GOP officials, including Trump, from using the claim to back up a phony narrative about voter fraud. Ken Paxton, the Texas GOP Attorney General, helped spread that fake news by declaring a voter fraud alert on Twitter. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott praised Whitley for uncovering and investigating this illegal vote registration. Civil rights groups, however, filed suit shortly after the purge began, and a federal judge sided with those groups in February, rebuking Texas officials for pursuing the lie and abusing the power of government to strike fear and anxiety to intimidate the least powerful among us. State officials have wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars and struck fear and confusion into thousands of voters in order to pursue their voter suppression agenda. Beth Stevens said, she's part of a group that sued the state of Texas. Continued, she said, "We are glad that this particular effort was stopped in its tracks, and we will remain vigilant to ensure that not one single voter loses their right to vote due to the actions of state officials." I meant to make mention earlier of some sad information that came earlier this morning. The family of John Singleton has confirmed that he passed away this morning, age 51. And as seminal director in the pantheon of Hollywood directors, will be greatly missed. This next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes from Think Progress by Ian Millhiser. An opinion handed down by 3 Republican judges could chill the First Amendment right of protesters and potentially allow police to shut down political movements by filing lawsuits harassing movement leaders in spite of Supreme Court rulings denying the cops' ability to do that. But this is a new day. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit decision in Doe v. McKesson, yes, that McKesson from, yeah, that's right, Black Lives Matter, effectively strips First Amendment protections from protest leaders who commit minor offenses, ignoring long-standing Supreme Court precedents in the process. The Doe in Doe v. McKesson is an anonymous police officer. They're always anonymous. Who was allegedly injured by an unknown protester who is not DeRay McKesson. McKesson is a prominent racial justice advocate closely associated with the Black Lives Matter movement who, according to this anonymous cop's complaint, helped organize a protest near the Baton Rouge Police Department building. Doe alleges that the unknown person, who again is not DeRay McKesson, picked up a piece of concrete or similar rock-like substance and hurled it into the police that were arresting protesters. Officer Doe claims he was hit by the rock and suffered serious injuries. If true, this rock thrower's actions are reprehensible, and whoever threw the rock belongs in prison. Well, maybe jail, in this reporter's opinion. Yet, in a legal complaint that is riddled with typos, because that's how it works now, accurate, inaccurate refrains, Doe's lawyers claim that McKesson should be liable for injuries and compensable damages greater than $75,000 because of the alleged actions of an unknown person who, in case this fact is not yet clear, is not DeRay McKesson. Doe's attorneys also offered several legal theories targeting the Black Lives Matter movement as a whole because, they're black. All of which were too much even for the panel of the Fifth Circuit judges that ruled against McKesson to contemplate. At one point, for example, Doe's lawyers tried to add the hashtag Black Lives Matter as a defendant. If money is speech, a hashtag is a person now, isn't it? One glaring problem with Doe's lawsuit is the First Amendment, which protects the right to join together in political associations. Yeah. As the Supreme Court explained in NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware, civil liability may not be imposed merely because an individual belonged to a group, some members of which commit acts of violence. Let us jump to the chase here. If an anonymous cop can claim personal injuries from the actions of a supposed protester, and that protest was organized by a group of people who we shall call protest leaders. If the cops can file suit against the protest leaders for the actions of someone that they don't know what they did, why would we, as U.S. citizens, not be able to sue the whole of a police department for the illegal actions of any one of their members? Anyone. For anything. These parking tickets were part of a quota, and that is illegal, so therefore the whole police department must be held accountable. I fear that my line of argument won't go anywhere because we all know cops are above the law, aren't they? also of Think Progress, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Facebook founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg keeps dashing any hope that the world's largest social media platform might be a positive force in the fight against catastrophic climate change. In its latest disastrous move to fight the online epidemic of fake news, Facebook's fact-checking effort announced last week that it was teaming up with CheckYourFact.com, an arm of the conservative anti-science media site The Daily Caller, Tucker Carlson's outfit. You know, racist white supremacist Tucker Carlson, he of the Swanson family TV dinner fortune. Wow. Hey, I really hate that apple dessert that you got there, Tucker. I hate it. The Daily Caller, which has published misinformation about climate science for years, was co-founded by the science-denying Fox News host Tucker Carlson and is backed by major conservative donors including Charles and David Koch, the billionaire fossil fuel barons who are the single biggest funders of climate science misinformation. Now, of course, they protected their properties against climate change because they're not stupid. They just know how to make a buck. Following the 2016 election and the growing realization that Russians, white supremacists, and many others have been using the site to promote hate speech, fake news, and misinformation, Facebook began partnering with independent fact-checkers, but this effort has been undermined by a series of missteps by Facebook and Zuckerberg. In the fall of 2017, Facebook named the climate science denying Weekly Standard an official fact-checking partner against the advice of an independent report. Okay, it wasn't who I said earlier. It was Bloody Bill Kristol's group. Zuckerberg probably figured, oh, well, he's like a never-Trumper. I guess it's okay. In May 2018, Zuckerberg brought in a right-wing think tank that spreads climate disinformation to figure out whether Facebook displays a liberal bias. Of course they would. Facebook even hired a PR firm with Republican ties to attack the company's critics and competitors. Well, because that's what businesses do now. It went on to smear philanthropist George Soros, who had been critical of Facebook, with anti-Semitic tropes and dog whistles. And last July, Zuckerberg made news when he explained that Facebook wouldn't explicitly ban even something as extreme as Holocaust denial because, hey, ideas have to get out there. Then, in clarifying his remarks, he said that while he won't block fake news from appearing on his site, his fact-checkers would stop it from spreading widely. Yeah, define wide. In December, the Weekly Standard ceased publication, raising the prospect that Facebook may correct its mistake in its hiring of climate science deniers as fact-checkers, but of course not. Zuckerberg never took a humanities class in his life, and he has no idea. No idea. But then Facebook announced last week that it was partnering with the fact-checking arm of the Daily Caller, which was launched in 2010 with $3 million from GP donor and climate science denier Foster Freeze. I love that name. Since then, many of the Daily Caller's stories have been written by its News Foundation, which has received funding from both the Charles Koch Institute and the Koch Family Foundations because propaganda is propaganda, and a dollar has to be made. It is beyond outrageous that in 2019, when the science of human-caused climate change has been overwhelmingly verified and every other nation but ours is desperately working to avert catastrophic impacts, the world's largest social media site is still partnering with climate science deniers because these rich boys, and there's a few girls with them too, let's be clear, the climate change won't impact them because they'll have so much money they'll be able to build a seawall around their domicile. Now, indeed, given how many outstanding nonpartisan organizations could serve as Facebook fact-checkers, environmental sociologist Robert Brule asked, why are they partnering with an organization that is part of the right-wing echo chamber? Now, Bruhl, who authored numerous studies on climate communications and lobbying, added, "This is one of the sites that needs to be fact-checked, not used as a reliable source. Facebook should cancel this contract." And I think that Mark has to have a closed-door sit-down with Trump, and then Trump will tell him what to do. All right, let's get to our break, and when we come back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, plowing ahead. With the new movie Diane, older moviegoers get a gem and an outlier from Hollywood's usual demographic focus. The movie is the first narrative directorial project from writer-comedian Kent Jones, formerly of The Rachel Maddow and Daily Shows, and is a deep character study with the lead played by veteran Mary Kay Place. Diane lives alone in the Berkshires and shares a rich community life. All, however, is not perfect, as we soon learn. She has a son with drug problems, a dying cousin, and one big secret. But she's anchored by community work, especially helping in a kitchen for the poor. We get to know the stoic Diane character in bits of conversations at dinners, in hospital rooms, and in a bar during a curious retrospective journey with a fabulous soundtrack. The big reveal sort of slides in at just about the right time for you to put it in perspective. Between substantive scenes almost like chapter demarcations are long first-person shots of her driving through the rural wooded landscape, often at night and almost always uphill. Diane's drug addict son, played by Jake Lacey, alternates between substance abuse and Jesus, and a dinner scene where Lacey's character attempts to save Diane's soul is as uncomfortable as it is telling. Along with Place and Lacey, not enough can be said about the cast of mature character actors who form the community with whom Diane interacts. And then there's product placement, specifically books by Emily Dickinson, which are at Diane's bedside and on her coffee table as she addresses her diary. Dickinson understood this movie's story 150 years ago, writing, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tunes without words and never stops at all." This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Adam Levy. On September 20th, 2017, a huge storm, Hurricane Maria, made landfall on Puerto Rico. While the initial estimates suggested around 60 people lost their lives as a result of this horrific hurricane, the official figure was later raised to the thousands.
We've all seen it on the news, right? We all watched how, or heard about how people didn't have power for a month after, 3 months, 6 months, a year after. Apparently there's still some people on the island that still don't have power.
David Keelings, a geographer at the University of Alabama. With a cost to America of $90 billion, Hurricane Maria was the third most financially destructive in U.S. history. But just how unusual was its intensity? Keeling set out to compare Maria to all the other storms that have hit Puerto Rico since records began in 1956.
Maria is more intense than any one of those other 128 storms that we have in the record. It's dropped more rainfall than any one of those other storms, and to a significant amount, about 30 to 60% more rainfall than any other storm in history in Puerto Rico.
So the question is, could climate change have played a role in this devastating record rainfall? While it's not possible to say a single storm is caused by climate change, it is possible to investigate whether climate change made a storm more likely. And this is exactly what Keelings investigated. He calculated how likely Maria was to take place in today's climate and in a world where we hadn't altered the global climate as much.
So we dial back global temperatures to the 50s, we dial back CO2 to the 50s, we dial back cloud cover to the 1950s, and then we calculate the probability of Maria again. And then we compare those two probability estimates. And when we do that, we find that Maria and Maria's precipitation in particular is about 5 times more likely now in the climate of today versus the climate of the 1950s. And that 5 times increase in likelihood is directly attributable to long-term climate change.
More and more research is finding links between extreme weather events and climate change, demonstrating that we're already feeling the impacts of global warming today. But Keelings points out that we shouldn't be surprised to find climate change's fingerprints on storms like Maria. After all, for decades researchers have predicted that by changing the climate, we would make hurricanes more intense.
This is something that we've known for a long time, but to now be actually able to say through these attribution type studies that, hey, this is what we expect theoretically, and guess what? This is what the observations are showing us. That's, I think, something that's really powerful.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Adam Levy.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwon is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with 3 things. 1, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
All forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have a limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-Hee. I've been talking today with Seung-Hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. When you stand up for civil rights and workers' rights, you never know how far the struggle may travel. This was the case on this day in labor history. The year was 1963. West Indian immigrants in Bristol, England, held a press conference to announce a boycott of the city buses. They were inspired by the bus boycotts led by Dr. Martin Luther King in Montgomery, Alabama. The Bristol Omnibus Company would not hire West Indian or black drivers. While the company would hire non-white workers for the garage, a color barrier stood between the West Indian workers and the more lucrative driving jobs. Even though the company had a driver shortage, they would take only white applicants. In 1962, 4 Jamaican men had founded the West Indian Development Council. The council aimed to address the unemployment and housing discrimination and threats of violence that West Indians faced every day. They were inspired by what they saw unfolding in the civil rights movement in the United States. They decided to take action. Some 7,000 West Indians in Bristol answered the call to boycott the buses. The bus company management blamed the drivers' union for the policy of discrimination. Indeed, some individual bus drivers spoke out that they did not want to work with West Indian people, but the union leadership adamantly denied they wanted the color barrier. The boycott wore on for 4 months, and in the end, finally, the color bar was lifted. That September, a Sikh named Ragbar Singh became the first non-white driver. The flame for justice that had been lit in Alabama had also caught fire in England. As we fight for workers' rights and social justice today, we must always remember our brothers and sisters who share our fight across the globe.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 49 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny conditions, winds are out of the southeast. Yes, well, I guess it would be south-southeast. At a negligible 1 mile per hour, we'll be shifting out of the north in about an hour and a half to 2 hours, increasing to 5 to 10 miles per hour. Continuing at that clip tonight, though shifted out of the north-northwest, and then tomorrow out of the north-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Overnight lows in the mid-upper 40s, highs into the low to mid-70s. A nice spring day here in Southern Oregon. Pollen is high, and it is grass pollen, and that's very high. And the air quality index has inched up what it was over the weekend. We're at 21 parts per million in the good range, though it was down to single digits. The daytime UV index is high, remaining at 7. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.72 inches, though visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 65%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 60 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 64 and partly cloudy. Rome is 55 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 53 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 58 degrees with a light rain shower. Hong Kong is 78 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 61 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and fair as New York can be fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Former top Justice Department official Sally Yates said that if Donald Trump was not president, he would have been indicted on obstruction charges in Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Yates, a career federal prosecutor who rose to attacking AG before Trump fired her in 2017, less than 2 weeks into his presidency, told NBC's Meet the Press the Republican president was shielded by department guidelines that a sitting president should not be indicted. I have personally prosecuted obstruction cases on far, far less evidence than this, Yates said, and yes, I believe if he were not the president of the United States, he would likely be indicted on obstruction, and I would say on a few other things as well. Mueller's report, redacted for classified and other sensitive information to cover it up, in this reporter's opinion, detailed a series of actions by Trump to impede the investigation. It did not make a conclusion on whether those actions constituted the crime of obstruction, and said that the findings did not exonerate him, because that is up to Congress, and they're trying to keep Congress from getting this. Yates told NBC, there was a larger question raised by the report, which she painted as a devastating portrait of a campaign that welcomed Russian intervention, lied about it, and then tried to cover it up. It is this kind of conduct that we should expect from the President of the United States. I mean, when the Russians came knocking at their door, you would expect that a man who likes to make a show of hugging the flag would have done the patriotic thing and notified law enforcement. Yates was fired by Trump after she took the extraordinarily rare step of defying the White House and refused to defend new travel restrictions targeting 7 Muslim-majority nations. But, of course, that was just the excuse.
Je te donne seulement l'amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Idris Ali of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. military said it sent 2 Navy warships through the Taiwan Strait on Sunday as the Pentagon increases the frequency of movement through the strategic waterway despite opposition from China. The voyage risks further raising tensions with China, but will likely be viewed by self-ruled Taiwan as a sign of support from the Trump administration amid growing friction between Taipei and Beijing. Taiwan is one of a growing number of flashpoints in the U.S.-China relationship, which also include a trade war, U.S. sanctions, and China's increasingly muscular military posture in the South China Sea, where the U.S. also conducts freedom of navigation patrols. The 2 destroyers were identified as the William P. Lawrence and the Stetham. The 112-mile-wide Taiwan Strait separates Taiwan from China. In Beijing, China Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhang Shong said China had paid close attention to the sailing and had expressed concern to the U.S. The Taiwan issue is the most important and sensitive issue in the Sino-U.S. relations, he said. The U.S. has no formal ties with Taiwan, but is bound by law to help provide the island with the means to defend itself and its main source of arms. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We'll meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesday, so stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin. jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus d'être tendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.